All right, welcome back for another episode of Carnivore Trades. Today is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. If you're not done so already, please give the video a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Come find me on carnivoretrades.com for swing trading alerts and analysis. Anyways, let's get into it here today. So markets are set to close in about a minute, and we'll cover the Netflix earnings. You can see there, it's trading up about 0.5%, nothing crazy. We'll check that after we get into the close, and that's really going to set the tone today. So we had a pretty good gap up this morning. Market's really overbought, gapping up overnight, and then a kind of a gap and crap into the morning session. And I did, a short video this morning. I said, look, we probably can float up a little bit here, as long as the volume remains light. We had, strength from semiconductors, which we'll talk about NVIDIA in a minute here. Very interesting. They got upgraded again at new highs. And always interesting to me whenever that happens. But in any case, markets did float right back up here, and we're basically just kind of hovering, just above the flat line. Triple Qs are up, 19 cents there. Spiders are up 40 cents, so nothing crazy. Dow is flat as a pancake. Russell is actually the weaker one this morning, as well as the KRE. So kind of sticking with that same theme, banks, regional banks, and the Russell 2000 bringing up the rear there. So markets are closed. Let's take a look at Netflix. They usually report pretty quickly here. We had a pretty good dump there initially. That doesn't look like it's out quite yet. But either way, pretty good dump. And we'll see what we get here. We'll go back to the spiders really quickly. But either way, we had a nice little float up. And I said that, as long as the market kind of, gets that light volume, we'll be able to hang in there okay. And it's still really kind of giving the market a little bit more of an upside bias here. All right, so it looks like Netflix is out. So we're down 13 points now in the after hours. Yeah, trading at 320. Pretty good little dump there. So that would take us down to right about this area here. So that would be that pivot high. Yeah, 320, 322, 325. So nice little dump there for Netflix after hours. All the way down to 310. Nice move. Okay, so Netflix, I don't know what the numbers are yet, but nice little dump down, and that's taking the Qs down at 318 there. So we're right near the lows of where we were 10 minutes ago, right before the close. So we'll see if Netflix can drag the sector down, or if they recover here. That can kind of set the tone for tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But Netflix generally, that's all the way down to 300. So there's your gap, and you got a gap fill at 293.90. So we'll be watching that possibly tomorrow. This could be, a day trading candidate tomorrow. It certainly will here. But Netflix obviously doing something the market didn't like there, and obviously setting the tone for tech earnings. Remember, we have Tesla on Thursday, so we'll be watching that as well. But nice little dump there for Netflix after hours. And if we go over to the triple Qs again, down to 318, nothing crazy. Remember, Netflix doesn't make up anywhere near what it used to for the triple Qs, but it does set the tone for earnings. Again, Tesla will be a lot bigger one going into Thursday afternoon there. But overall, nothing terrible here for the markets, right? You still just kind of, they managed to scratch out a 2 cent gain there by the close. And, volume remains light. So again, I'll give it the upside bias, at least until this gap. But I think bulls are probably going to need some type of a catalyst here. We had a nice gap up this morning, but they just couldn't really hold the gains. We are starting to get a little overbought here too. I mean, think about where we were here. We're at 380 about a month ago, just a little over a month ago. And we topped out today at 415. That's a pretty big move there. It's almost 40 points on the spiders in really just a month. So that's a pretty good percentage gain there. I think, yeah, it's 9.2%. So that's a big move there in just a month for the spiders. So either way, we're still going to give the market the upside bias unless things change here. It does look like we can get up to that double top area, possibly even this gap fill. That's a pretty good resistance zone though currently, and you see the spiders trying to stabilize here around 414. So basically just at the lows of that little 10-minute candle. Same thing with the Qs there, right around that 318 handle. But the one kind of silver lining here for bulls is Netflix now below that 300 handle. Is that if the Netflix sets the bar, right? So if Netflix is poor, that kind of lowers expectations for everyone else. So kind of makes it a little bit easier for those other companies to beat. But either way, Netflix dragging down the market here just a little bit. But outside of that, a pretty quiet news day, all things considered. Nothing really going on. We had some Fed speakers earlier, but they did not really move the market too much. We did have a nice little dump in the morning, but overall, ended up flat here. So we'll just kind of leave it at that, really. I mean, we're going into tomorrow. Nothing's really changed here, so we just still have a market that's getting overbought, but there's no real problems here. Again, if we have a high volume reversal, that changes everything, but market's still hanging in there for now. And again, it is options X week, so we have to be careful of that. There's going to be lots of whipsaw, just like there was, the last 2 days. Again, going into this back on the spiders intraday. Yesterday we had lots of whipsaw. Today we had whipsaw as well on both sides. So definitely be careful in this market, and still kind of giving the market a little bit of an upside bias here. Probably until at least, the next couple of days, maybe OPEX. Everybody's looking at the VIX right now, but the VIX is probably going to get crushed again tomorrow. We do have VIX-piration coming up Friday, and there's a pretty big spread on contango on the VIX. So we'll be watching that. It's going to gap up on Thursday. But, the VIX is, it's been getting hammered here. It's starting to get attractive. But, as long as this market, has light volume, there's really not a whole lot that bulls need to be afraid of here, at least at this moment. But, you get a high volume reversal, that all changes though. Anyways, triple Qs here, we already talked about that. Again, it's fractionally higher here. We'll see if it can go fill that gap maybe sometime later this week. Russell 2000 still showing weakness. Again, this is a weak indice, had a weak day. Down 0.5% here, weekly bear flag inside of a monthly bear flag. Nothing really good there. So overall, Russell in weak shape here. The Dow managing to, make it back to the flat line. You still have a daily inside bar. So this is holding up okay, and this can still get to 343 if we have one more push here. JNJ took a pretty big hit here, down almost 3%. And Goldman also dragged down the Dow, although it did come nicely off the lows here, down just 1.7%. Bank of America as well. That did kind of offset it a little bit, up 63 basis points. But the Dow coming under pressure with Goldman being down there so much as it was. This is a really good resistance level here on Bank of America, right around 30. We'll call it 3150. It's 3140, but we'll give it a little bit more wiggle room. But you have that 50 moving average as well as that pivot low red bar, so that will be resistance. You're going straight up into that, so that should get a reaction off of that area if it gets up there. I don't know if it does, but Bank of America came off the lows here, was negative, and it finished positive, so we'll give it the upside bias for now. JP Morgan still holding up decently well as well. This probably wants to get up into this, previous breakdown area, but big move there, power move for JPM, and that's still holding up well, so we'll respect that for the time being. All right, over to so we talked about the Dow. Let's get over to our semis. So semiconductors. All right, so up 0.5% here today. Interesting. So let's look at NVIDIA. They got upgraded here by HSBC at the highs, and they made new 52-week highs but couldn't hold the gains. Came way off the highs, actually. This does look like a distribution pattern to me, and basically it hasn't gone anywhere for really the last month, but it seems like it's going somewhere because it's just holding up so well. But, if you know anything about how these upgrades, these analysts work, I'm always skeptical when something's at a 52-week high or 52-week low and it gets upgraded. Notoriously Goldman Sachs upgrading oil at the exact day that it topped out in 2007. It's just that type of feel here. It just feels like they were doing this to unload into it. By the way, look at the volume increase there and take a look at the intraday price action. So let me flip back to my normal settings so we don't have that after hours in the way. But again, you see the big volume there and then came right in. So there's probably a lot of selling going on into that. Again, this does look like distribution to me. It looks like a Wyckoff pattern. High, higher low, slight higher high. If you take this low out, it's probably going down to, well, I know it's going down to 240 no matter what. But, these things take time. But this is a major level for NVIDIA to hold right now. But again, we'll respect it. It's still making new highs, technically speaking. And you're above the moving averages. But I mean, just way overbought and extended. And coming into, lots of weekly resistance with this red bar here. So again, NVIDIA, I think upside is limited. That's been the case for quite some time here, the last probably, 4 weeks at least, which we've talked about. And it really hasn't gone anywhere since that big reversal candle on the 22nd. It has made a new nominal high here and there, but this looks very tired to me, and typically when you see those upgrades at the end, it looks because they're looking for exit liquidity. So they got all the retail investors to buy the open today, and they likely unloaded into that. So in any cases, that relates over to the SMH. It's still struggling with that 20-day moving average. It's hanging in there, though. Nothing terrible right now, but again, semis making lower highs. versus, the rest of the market trying to make higher highs here. So that is a problem here. Again, we're just watching that big rising wedge. Upside is up to this upper trend line, which I don't see us getting to. A break of this downside trend line is a huge problem for the market and for tech. IGV hanging in there. Okay, that actually made a new high. So our high of the day here was 305.63, and that took out the previous high of 304.99, which was right there on the 4th. It did not make a new closing high, but still holding up well, and we've talked about that with Cloud. We're giving that the upside bias to 310 until proven otherwise there. So Cloud hanging in there pretty nicely. Dow Transport's a gap and crap as well. That did finish negative. We touched that 50 moving average and got rejected. So that level, 14.4, 14.5, that area, let's say 14.450. That's been a tough area for the transports here the last 2 or 3 weeks. You do have higher lows though, so if you consolidate further, you can push up. I definitely can't rule that out. We talked about 14.750 being a possible level, but this is this is starting to get a weekly bear flag look. So that's not a good. We can actually just draw it in here on the daily. Let's put it right there. So we got this kind of like lower trend line. And then there you go. There's your higher trend line. So almost kind of like a bear wedge, bear pennant, rising wedge. We'll see if that coils up in here and pushes down. Transports are vulnerable. But either way, nothing terrible today. Just finished down, basically flat there, but still struggling with that 50-day moving average there. Anyways, let's get over here to bonds. So interest rates again, 2-year coming down a little bit here. You start to lose these pivots, it's going to be problematic. You lose these moving averages, it's going to be problematic. For the 2-year, if we look at the yield, this is on the futures, by the way, so not quite the same, but it's at 4.132. And the important thing with yields right now is you get above these pivots, it's going to put pressure on the Fed to raise rates again. Right now, the market is kind of in the thought that the Feds can pause, and they can technically because they are ahead of the 2-year yield, but if this keeps going higher, that's going to change. So bonds hanging in there for now, but they have backed off pretty nicely. You see the 10-year actually just finishing with an inside day there on the yield, and the 30-year, same thing, just a little inside day here. But again, I don't see a ton of downside in yields right now. Even if they sell off a little bit, there's not a ton of downside in a big picture kind of stance here. So be careful with yields. And speaking of yields, and I mean, let's look over to home builders here. What can you say? They just defy gravity here. I think maybe there's still some short squeezing going on, but if you know your macro, this doesn't make any sort of sense here, especially the ITB. This looks like it wants double top. Well, we've got rates at 5% on the Fed funds, and we're on the cusp of a recession, and home builders are acting like we have ZERP here. So to me, this is probably the most overvalued sector in the market. Got to respect it. The trend is up. We'll probably get to double top there on the ITB. XHB is much weaker. I see probably, $70, I would say, is probably your max move for right now. But, what can you say? They're holding up really well. I would expect that some of this is short squeezing. I know a lot of this move certainly was. Everybody was expecting rates to continue higher, and, you get the boat crowded to one side. But right now, interesting little, so that's no longer a descending triangle, obviously. But you'll have resistance at this pivot here, as well as this kind of breakdown area around 70, 69.50. But home builders just baffling move. And when you have the VNQ, obviously we've talked about that. That is behaving like rates are at 5% and we're on the cusp of a recession. But those home builders, what can you say? They're just holding up really well here. VNQ, sloppy kind of consolidation pattern, nothing terrible here. I just don't see a ton of upside at the moment. If you do, again, 85.50. is pretty good resistance there on the daily time frame. XLF, so that pushing up a little bit. Remember, Goldman was down, but it came off the lows, and Bank of America held up. We'll get rid of this wedge. We don't care about that. We can use this trend line, though. Again, you'll have resistance up here at that 250 moving average. Excuse me. Should you get up there, in the next couple of days, you get up there, you're kind of overbought. $30 to 34 for XLF is a pretty big move, especially just in a few days. But that's a good area of resistance there. I bet you there's a fib too. Let's take a look at XLF. Yeah, so right into that 50% fib. So there's going to be stiff resistance at 33.75, we'll call it, on the XLF. And then if you get through that, you get up to your 618 at 34.50. But I would think this is going to be pretty good here, at least for the daily time frame, maybe even on a weekly basis. for XLF, but nice bid off the lows, and it's acting much better than it was. XBD, slight new higher high, but still a weekly bear pattern here for the most part. KRE, still very soft. KBE, still very soft. These problems aren't going away, but the market can ignore it as long as you have light volume. Anyway, shifting over to energy, crude basically flat despite Zero Hedge trying their best to pump it every day. It's basically holding up off this 200 moving average. It came off the lows. I'm interested to see what it does when we get this 20 moving average to catch up to price. If it can get one more bid up into that 85 area, I think it's going to be very good resistance, but it's holding up for right now. I still think it's just too extended. It's got to fill that gap before it does anything else, but it's hanging in there just okay. XLE, same thing. Again, struggling with that 100 moving average, but it's hanging in there. And you've got, basically daily chart consolidation. If it consolidates further, it can go up into that upper 89 area, 88, 89 area, but it's hanging in there fine. XOP, same thing, just backing off a little bit. Again, that trend line has been pretty good resistance. I'm interested to see again what will happen with that 20 moving average. Does it act as fuel to push it up to 140, or do we kind of chop around and push lower here? OIH also still really sloppy here. Now, if this can consolidate and firm up, then it can put in a good pattern. But right now, it's still too immature here, and I just don't like the volatility that's been in this. If you lose 280 again, especially if you lose this pivot, it's going to be in trouble. But for right now, it's holding up, and we'll just leave it at that. Nat Gas getting a nice bid here. That's above the 50 moving average for the first time since December 16th. So big move there for Nat Gas, getting off the floor. Again, we talked about this Wyckoff pattern on the 4 hour. That's pretty textbook: low, higher low, lower low, and then a failed breakdown. We talked about this. Sellers just look exhausted here. And, they tried breaking it through that $2 level 5 times or 4 times in the last, 3 weeks. And, eventually sellers give up if they're too exhausted. And that's really what's happening here. Also kind of, we've mentioned we're going into a very favorable season right now for nat gas. It typically bottoms towards the end of quarter one, and we get a bid into quarter two, quarter three. And, that may be starting up now. Again, resistance on the daily will be at 350. If you get through that, it's all the way up to $3. So nat gas holding up better. Dollar index backing off the 20 moving average, but still nothing terrible here. And I'll take you over to TradingView so we can get a better look at it as we look at Bitcoin there. Bitcoin's still holding up really well. And that also continues to give me an upside. But let's just cover Bitcoin now. So Bitcoin giving me an upside bias here. It's holding up, you held that 20 moving average. We had a nice little dip yesterday, and buyers aggressively coming in, right? So when you see that, you want to give whatever asset it is you're trading an upside bias here, and that's holding up well. So we're still looking for 32, maybe 32.5, and that does give me, kind of a, more of an upside bias with the equity markets, despite Netflix apparently missing earnings. Again, I haven't looked at the numbers. I'll look at them after we're done here. But honestly, we don't care about the numbers. We just care about the reaction. But anyways, dollar index selling at 101.73 here. Again, we talked about that 20 period moving average. We went up into that, and now we're just backing off it. One area that I'm watching here, and I do have it on my Thinkorswim charts, but there is a trend line if you want to draw it in here, a couple of them. And it's making kind of a falling wedge pattern. I'm just trying to get that in exact there. There we go. So we'll see. Again, originally I talked about this possibly going down to that 100, maybe 150 handle. That could happen. So if we have a rejection here at this 20, that's probably where it's going to want to go, and it's going to hit this lower trend line here. If this starts to consolidate and firms up, then the low is likely in, and it's going to want to go higher. But for right now, that's what I'm watching here as far as the dynamic is concerned on the DXY. But nice little, rejection of that area there. We'll see what it does going into tomorrow. Over to gold here. So gold managing to bounce as you'd expect with the DXY coming back in. And again, remember that level there, 1994. That's your green bar low. So that is support here. Let's just draw that in there. 1994. So that is support on a daily basis. If you get a close below that, this can go, it's probably going to go test, what I say, 1975 yesterday, maybe 1970, maybe even 1960 again. But it's holding up well right now. You do have a slight higher high. It got rejected. It came in pretty sharply. And it's basically finding some support at that 20 moving average. I do think it's still overbought here, but, as there's fear out there, this can go higher. it's strange, right? Because you've got gold up because of fear, but the VIX is, getting annihilated. So we've got like fear and complacency at the same time. I think a lot of it is market participants right now are buying gold in anticipation that the Fed is going to aggressively cut rates. I'm not in that camp right now. I think yields have bottomed, as you know. And by bottomed, I mean like the macro bottom. I'm not saying they can't go lower. I'm not saying the 30-year can't come down again to 3.2 there on the TYX, but macro-wise rates, I think, have bottomed. That eventually will be bullish gold, but I don't think that is quite yet. But gold's holding up. Can't take anything away from it. Silver also holding up after that 1-2 pullback yesterday. Held a 25 handle. We'll see what it does here, what kind of pattern it puts in. But there's still a lot of weekly resistance up here at 26 with that red bar. Over to platinum here. So nice bid there for platinum. Again, just continuing to pop here. This probably wants double top, honestly. And yeah, what can you say? I thought it would have to consolidate a little bit more to get up into this area, but that's what commodities do. They just overshoot whenever they feel like it. But lots of weekly resistance up here with this double top and this big red bar. A lot of volume up there, right? So we'll be watching that. But, Platinum's had a really nice run, 900 to basically 1100 here. That's a big move there for PL futures. And yeah, I like Platinum right here. Well, I like it better than the other metals, as I've mentioned, but it's still way too overbought for me to chase it at this point. But either way, nice move there for platinum. Copper also hanging in there. Again, if this consolidates, I guess it can go higher here, but I'm not so convinced that it's got that much more of a move in it. All right, so we talked about Bitcoin already. Again, still holding up here. I'll just use the Thinkorswim. Still holding up just fine. We'll look for 32 to 32.5. Just to reiterate that, that's really kind of where I see the majority of resistance coming in for Bitcoin, where it could actually have a move lower. Netflix here, so settling at 320. So it's holding up okay. So right there, it bounced all the way down to 300. I'll be looking to day trade this tomorrow for sure. Hopefully you can get more of a gap down or something like that. Give us some volatility for tomorrow. Let's take a look at the Qs. Yeah, so NQ getting a 50 cent, or triple Q's getting a 50 cent bounce. NQ looks just fine here. So nothing terrible. Look at that. Barely even, it didn't even take out the low from earlier. So NQ is behaving well despite Netflix. ES is actually back to the green side here, so nothing terrible. Again, we'll give the market the upside bias here until proven otherwise. We get high volume reversal. That can change really quickly, but as long as volume remains light, you got to give the market kind of the benefit of the doubt. Anyways, guys, can wrap up here. You guys take care. Come find me on carnivoretrades.com. Talk to you all tomorrow.